Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé, happily ever after. Let's watch, see what comes out of my face.
But I haven't seen Charlie the Bum for a year since the barbecue, and seeing him today, I just hope that my fist will not talk faster than my mouth.
Wow. Jesus, Andrei, so he's coming in there thinking that he's hoping that he doesn't punch Charlie in the middle of the family session. Andrei, come on.
Jen, nice to meet you.
And Jean, nice to meet you.
Twinsies. Did you guys plan that?
No.
I'm Jean.
Hi, I'm Megan. Nice to meet you.
Hello, I'm Charlie.
Hi, Charlie. Nice to meet you. Welcome. Please come in.
All right, so all the seats are taken. I would assume that the therapist knew who was all going to come, and the only family members we've seen on the show who aren't there are the kids of these various family members, which makes sense. But some family members would say, no, I want all the kids, I want everyone, I want the grandparents. There's pros and cons to that. The con is that you don't want to expose children to undue stress and information, but often the kids have witnessed it anyway. If I did have the kids in the session, I would say, so I just want to say that since the kids are here, I don't want them to be exposed to anything that would harm them. So if any of you adults want to get into talking about something that you would predict either the kids don't know or might be a little too much for them, then we can table it for another session or even ask the kids to not be in the room or something like that. That'd be hard to facilitate. You'd need an assistant, or sometimes maybe like a family member might be able to take the kids outside or something. But yeah, so we haven't seen them. But I'm pretty sure there are other siblings. From my memory, there were something like 7 siblings, 6 at least. And there's only 4 of the siblings there. So, and then of course the spouses of Jen. I keep wanting to say her name's Debbie, but I don't think that's her name. And so those people aren't there. But this is a really great first session. This is a lot to ask for. I mean, this is a family therapist's dream. And I'll tell you, it was pretty rare for me to work with adult family members. Often family therapy is sought out when you have a child or a teenager that is causing issues, or there's divorce, or someone dies in the family, this kind of thing, and the children are minors. But it was rare that I would get all adult siblings and the parents coming into therapy. It would happen, but I actually really liked that work because there's so much that can be done. Because one of the things that you can at least hope for is that, well, since they're all adults, they should be able to have at least some capacity for maturity, which you can't necessarily guarantee in children. Plus, a lot can be on the table. You don't have to tiptoe around certain topics necessarily because they're all adults and presumably should be able to handle those kinds of things. So let's see what happens.
Sit down. Okay, we're all here. We'll get started.
What I'm trying to hope to get accomplished today is to try to bring my family back together. I would like to reconcile with Libby. I don't really care about Andrei.
Yeah, that's a good start. Charlie, at least in that segment, and maybe he'll ruin this in a bit, but he is saying he wants to get his family back together. He wants to reconcile. That's good. He doesn't really necessarily care about Andrei, but he's not saying things that Andrei is saying, and Andrei, you better watch it or else I'm going to punch him in the face. So it sounds like the door is a little ajar there that we might be able to capitalize on. So let's see what happens.
If he wants to get aggressive, I'm going to defend myself.
Chuck and Pam, you wanted this to happen because you felt like it could be really helpful.
Okay, so right off the bat, I think we're learning that Chuck and Pam were the individuals of the family that reached out to the therapist, Dr. Malloy, and that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought that Pam would want that for a variety of reasons. I don't know the family very well, obviously, but given what we've seen from Pam, I would wonder if Pam. So I wonder what's going on in her mind. I think I know what's going on in Chuck's mind. I think he wants everyone to get along. I think he is worried and he is scared, but I think he really, really, really wants everyone to get along. Pam, I think, at least given what we've seen on the show this season, there could be a chance that she doesn't necessarily care about Andrei, but she wants everyone to accept Charlie. I think she's been on that mission, right? That she doesn't want Charlie to be rejected. And seemingly, at least in the edit, Pam doesn't have a problem with discounting, dismissing rational thoughts and feelings that the rest of the family has about Charlie. She just doesn't care about any of that. She's just like, well, but you have to accept Charlie. And there's various different possibilities there, one of which is sort of the top of the hypothesis list, is that Pam grew up in a family that had an alcoholic member, and someone who suffered from alcohol addiction, maybe one of her parents, and learned that that's just kind of the way things are, and learned that in order to, and maybe even her role in her family was to placate and to minimize the negative effects of the alcoholism. Oftentimes one of the kids will be elected to do that. And so she's just in that mode of just like, well, this is how I earn my place in the family, is to make sure that no one rejects the person with the alcohol problem, because that's how I get praised. That's how I feel good about myself. And if the opposite happens, then I feel like I'm failing as a family member. People will be programmed to be that way sometimes, and they can be extremely one-dimensional and ignore everything else, at the cost of making sure that no one rejects the Charlie in the group. So maybe that's her motivation, because she certainly hasn't exhibited up until this point the motivation that Chuck seems to exhibit, which is just like, can people please just get along? And I want to hear it from it seems like Chuck tries to hear from everyone. I mean, Chuck has his issues, but I think generally speaking, so I don't know. Now, like I said earlier, it's totally normal that everyone will come to a family session wanting something that isn't viable or therapeutic or healthy. They could all come to this session saying that other person has a problem, or, some sort of codependency motivation. But it takes an artful, experienced therapist to be able to kind of use that motivation, those unhealthy motivations, why they're coming to therapy, and kind of massage it and slowly but surely direct it towards a collaborative goal, a goal that we don't impose on the client as therapists, but a goal that the family agrees with, but is more healthy and more attainable, right? And not exploitative, and where everyone takes at least some responsibility for.
With that said, I'd like to know from each of you, what would you like to see change?
Great question. I'm guessing that this is a little bit into the session. There was talk of confidentiality, signing forms, or they did that already or something. But it's a great question to start off. What would you like to see change? Excellent question. It'd be hard to imagine a different sort of question that one would start with. And it gets complicated, and this is why a lot of family therapy sessions are longer than 1 hour, because you could literally spend 1 hour making sure that everyone answers that question, because there'll be back and forth and maybe crosstalk and this kind of thing. And so there are, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people, and if each person talks for a few minutes, you're almost all done with the session by that point. So sometimes family therapy sessions can be 2, 3 hours. I've had family sessions that were longer than 3 hours long. So, and the hours just whizzed by because there's just so much to cover and there's so much activity that's happening. And of course, you charge for that time. You're a business and you're trying to pay your bills, and so that's the thing.
Before we had these blow-ups, I have a business and my kids worked in my business with me, and we were always attending each other's events. And
okay, so I don't know, it's always edited, but from the edit, Chuck spoke first. It would be another assessment data point that maybe Chuck is the real person who really wants all the therapy to happen and is a leader in the family. You would note that as well, which is true. It seems as though Chuck is definitely the leader, not only just emotionally, but also financially and occupationally. And Pam is not so, I think Pam's also a leader, but I imagine she comes across more like another sibling and less of a parent to them. That's the vibe, it seems, Chuck comes across more of an authority and more of someone who tries to consider everyone's point of view, whereas Pam doesn't seem to do that. That's interesting to think about, that the two sisters, Jen and I keep forgetting her name, that they are similar to Pam in that they very rigidly take sides. Pam and the two sisters, they sort of zero in on just one aspect of the conflict and become extremely hyper-focused on that and try to fit everything into that. So it could be that the sisters learned that from the mom. I don't know. And I don't even know if I'm seeing the situation right because I'm only watching a reality TV show. But anyway, so Chuck speaks first and it's just like there was a time when we all supported each other. We went to each other's events and now we're not. And I don't like that. And so it's interesting that that's kind of how he starts. I just want everyone to get along, right? Because there could have been he could have said something else in this moment. He could have said like, well, there's a lot of conflict in his family and I feel like people are kind of rigid and going after each other. He's not saying that because that's more provocative. He's just saying, I just want everyone to love each other.
And, we were always attending each other's events. And now we're split, birthday party over here, birthday party over there, Christmas over here, Christmas over there, and it's really hard to have a split family.
Dude, you've been doing that all life. What are you talking about?
Were things ever normal?
Okay, so as a therapist, you would instantly note that and go, okay, so what's going on here? That the twin, the bond between Chuck and Andrei is more complicated because Andrei immediately, chimes in. Libby also chimes in with something. So I would also note that Libby, this is interesting. There's a lot of data being presented just to me as a YouTuber, because I've been watching this family for a long time, and there's a lot of isolated moments where you can see the roles and see the dynamic and see, because I'm always trying to extrapolate to not only their life away from the cameras, but also into the past. And one of the aspects of family therapy is recognizing the roles that people have. And the more unhealthy, the more undifferentiated a family is, the more rigid and more problematic to everyone the roles will become. And the more unidimensional that people will become in their roles, in every family there's always roles, but is there flexibility in that role? Is the healthy dimension indicator? If there's rigidity and lack of flexibility in the roles, then we're looking at a more undifferentiated, problematic family that's not very aware of what's going on and doesn't have positive routines, and so. So for Libby, immediately the data point is she's doing something that's just a classic truth sayer in a family. Sometimes that's a scapegoat. Sometimes that's the parentified kid. But at the very least, she is saying to the dad, you're painting a picture that things were fine before and now they're bad. And I think Libby is saying that because she wants to get out ahead of what she knows will come out as a narrative that will be pushed, which is that as soon as she married Andrei, then everything became bad and everything was good before. And Libby's like, no, things have always been bad. Sure, we went to each other's birthdays, but before I met Andrei, things were bad. I think that's what she's saying.
Christmas over here, Christmas over there, and it's really hard to have a split family.
Dude, you've been doing that all life. What are you talking about?
Dude, you've been doing that your whole life. So I think Andrei is saying in a lesser articulate way, essentially what Libby's saying. It's like, no, things aren't bad now. They've always been bad, I think is what he's trying to put forth. So an anxious therapist would get really scared that there's conflict happening right now, and they would want to shut it down. Now, there's nothing wrong with shutting it down if, as a therapist, that's your style. And I could see a therapist being that way, and we'll see what Dr. Malloy does. But you could see a therapist saying, well, I just want to, because that is something that I will do sometimes, depending, especially if I only have an hour. I'll be like, well, let's hold off on crosstalk right now. We'll get into that. But I just want everyone to have a chance to say what's on their mind without worrying that it's going to cause a fight. Because I just want to have that. I just want to make sure everyone tells me, because I need to know, all 9 of you, what you want out of therapy. So, we'll get to that. And thanks for chiming in, because that's where we're here, family therapy, communication. But let's hold off on that for a second. Is that okay? That kind of thing. Another approach is to let this play out, because there's a lot of data that you can get. A lot of data. Has just in 2 seconds of them reacting, there's a lot of data that you're getting.
Things ever normal? Because I feel like how we were raised, our norm is abnormal. Well, what is normal?
I think I understand what she's saying. She grew up in a broken household.
Okay, so the therapist is letting it breathe, which is great. That would be probably what I would do, especially because it doesn't seem to be out of control. And then as a therapist, I would also note that Jen says, well, what's normal? Or, every family is abnormal. Then I'd say like, oh, so Libby's the one that will call out the problems of the family. And Jen might be one of the, who knows, but based on that data point, her role is to either placate or downplay or minimize or something, save the parents. And then the Chuck individual says, I don't know why I said it that way, Chuck says that he's like, yeah, I understand. And so I'd immediately note that, oh, even though they're opposing Chuck and interrupting him, he's allowing that. He's not reactive. And he agrees with him. Yeah, I could see that. But then he pointed something out. He's like, yeah, I understand. It's a broken family. I would note the word broken, but I wouldn't necessarily intervene, obviously, in this moment. But because we don't want people thinking that they have broken families. Now, it's linguistics, it's semantics. It depends on what people mean by broken family. But I don't want people to feel like their families are broken. I don't want them to feel like there's something deeply, inherently wrong. And that's certainly a message that we send out about divorce and whatnot. But anyway, but I would note that Chuck isn't necessarily agreeing entirely with what Libby and Andrei are saying. He's attributing it to divorce, which is probably a big part of it. But I think I don't know if I would detect it in this moment, given how little data is presented, but me watching this, I don't think Libby is just referring to the divorce. I think she's talking about, since the beginning, there's been all sorts of problems. And I've been wondering about the other addiction issues in this family or what's going on, because I have a feeling that, and it wouldn't be unusual for there to be other addiction issues if Charlie has a problem with addiction, and there seems to be a fair amount of alcohol and drug use in the family. Of course, I don't know, but it's possible that there is that, and the individuals have agreed that they're not going to disclose that, or they don't want to disclose, maybe Pam, maybe Chuck, maybe both, who knows, but it wouldn't be unusual for that to happen. It's pretty strange that you'll have what seems to be a pretty major addiction. We don't know, but that's the way the show is painting it. It'd be strange for that individual to have to that degree that they're portraying in the show without any other people in the family also having an issue, or at least some other addiction. It could be gambling addiction or work addiction or something. So anyway, let's continue watching.
How we were raised, our norm is abnormal. Well, what is normal?
Okay, so I just noticed that other sister, I got to look up her name. Becky. I keep forgetting. I think I said Debbie earlier. Yeah, it's interesting that Becky actually agreed with Libby in that moment. And I think Becky has indicated things along those lines. I think Becky is older than the other two, Jen and Libby, I think. I don't know that. But so Becky, she nods her head. So now if you're the therapist, you probably don't have the ability to note everyone's reaction, because I think she's looking at the people talking, which would be good. But at least for me watching, I can see that's interesting that Becky, I think Becky is a complicated person in this family. If you just look at the big moments, it looks like Becky is pretty one-dimensional, especially this season and maybe a little bit last season. I think and of course this makes sense, there'd be a lot of nuance to this. There'd be a lot of depth and variability and chaos in an inability to sort of lock everyone down to a simplistic summary of their place, because I would have assumed, based on the simplistic assessment of the family, that Becky would be like Jen and reject Libby right away and say, what are you talking about? Everything's fine. But that's not what Becky did. Becky's like, and she's like, no. Or Becky's like, yes, it's true that our family has been struggling since the beginning.
Dude, you've been doing that all life. What are you talking about?
Were things ever normal? Because I feel like how we were raised, our norm is abnormal. Well, what is normal?
I think I understand what she's saying. She grew up in a broken household. Half the kids live with me, the other half live with my ex.
Yeah, so I think that is another example of how Chuck, under stress, will try to simplify and also protect people. I don't know who he's protecting, if it's himself or maybe it's Pam. Maybe this is when Libby says that of like, Things have always been messed up. I wouldn't be surprised if 90% of the reason why Libby is saying that is sort of directed at Pam. And who knows? And then Chuck is saying, well, yeah, well, half the kids lived here, half the kids lived there. And that's interesting that he's bringing that up. Does that mean that, I don't know, I'm just reading into it. But I wouldn't be surprised if there was a fair amount of unhealthy triangulation of the kids into the parents, conflict pre and during and post-divorce, which isn't unusual, which is a tragedy when that happens to kids. But it's interesting that Chuck is just laying out kind of the facts. Again, he's just like, well, it's just divorce, it's a broken family. That's the only problem. Let's move on. I think I'm guessing Chuck just wants everyone to shake hands and everyone to be nice, because I'm guessing Chuck thinks that if they get into the nitty-gritty of the matter, that things will explode and there'll be no chance for this family to get back together. All right, well, that is it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.